Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center, sponsored by Fieldstone's Communities, Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers innovative and compassionate care, and are now accepting residents. They also offer day stay and respite programs. Call 360-689-4314 to schedule a tour of Fieldstone's beautifully appointed apartments. I'd also like to acknowledge that the Senior Community Center is on the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish tribe, the people of the clear salt water. We honor them and are grateful for their hospitality. And today, David Harrison checks in with us with his monthly review of national politics. David was the founder and executive director of the Northwest Policy Center at the University of Washington. As a senior lecturer, he taught policy analysis for many years at the university's Evans School. Good morning, David.
Hello, I see that I'm on my daughter-in-law's computer, and she changed the name from her to me, but left the she, her in. You see that so it's part of a changing America for sure. So I want to start a little bit with the classified information and the Justice Department and Trump, and then let's go to our wonderful predictions. Our group together was talking 4 or 5 months ago about what would have to happen for us to have any better chance to take the House, which at last March or so seemed unthinkable. And pretty much all those things have happened. So let's spend the bulk of our time talking about where we're going from here and what has to happen between now and November for Kevin McCarthy to not be speaker, which of course would be an awful thing. And then I want to end with a couple reminders to ourselves about how we acquit ourselves in our criticisms of the other side, because I think if we're going to win the center, which is how we win elections, it would be good for us to join the issues accurately. So first, I think what happened today is very interesting. If any of us who keep meticulous filing systems are exempted from this comment, but what Trump's got in his files is it's organized very much like me. He's got. They gave an expanded inventory this morning, and it's in the Wall Street Journal, and it's got clippings and pictures and notes to himself. Unfortunately, it has one other thing, and that's top secret information. So that's where he and I differ. I don't have any of that. But as you know, at one time or another, he's said that they don't have any such information. In fact, much to her disadvantage, his lawyer certified that he did not. Cases like that, you could get in trouble. Lawyers are, of course, officers of the court, and you have to be careful what you sign your name to. After he said there wasn't anything there at all, when the FBI came, he said, a lot of his supporters said, well, this information is planted. But after that, rather than being planted, it was automatically declassified, and having it in his presence meant that he could take a top secret piece of information and make it available, which was always a bogus claim because there's a procedure for declassifying, and after you declassify, it's available under the Freedom of Information Act. So, and then after that, they claimed that it was no different than you having a overdue library book, which is my favorite because Cindy was the librarian at Bainbridge for years. So, and she never absolutely ever cuffed anybody for having an overdue library book. I think it's the initial article, the initial commentary by David Brooks and others that this would be a classic overreach by the FBI and the Department of Justice that would draw independent voters to Trump and make it more likely that Trump voters would vote in November. was silly. It's turning, there's no evidence in any election, primary election since that's the case at all. And I think what's happening now, of course, is what usually happens when too many people have too much information. And that is the people who were once with Trump, like Stephanie Grisham and others, are just feeding stuff to the New York Times. And so we get this daily dose of how Trump treated classified information, including him reveling and knowing about the secret life of Macron. So by the time we get to know, there's no way that Donald Trump will ever be jailed for this, but there's also no way that this turns out well for him. It's just one more thing that shows he is self-entitled, idiotic, non-patriotic, malevolent disaster of a former president. And there aren't any votes to be had for keeping top secret documents, including personal intelligence that could reveal the identity of somebody in another country who spied for the United States. It's a bad thing, and it's good for us. The idea that Merrick Garland is going to be too enthusiastic about searching Donald Trump's house or prosecuting him is absurd. We all know that the man is exceedingly cautious on that matter. When he said, I said to this group 3 months ago, and Merrick Garland said, no one is above the law, that's a little signal that he might well prosecute Trump, and we've gone over what he would prosecute him for. This just creates a fourth problem, the big four, outside of personal complaints, civil complaints from women who he's molested, are the tax problems that he has, where his former chief advisor has already been sentenced, and who has promised to testify against the Trump organization. And then the big three, this one with FBI search of his Mar-a-Lago, and then the big two, Fani Willis, the prosecutor in Florida, who in Fulton County, and then of course whether Trump is charged for any part of the insurrection, or just as possibly Trump being charged for all the fraudulent activity in setting up slates of fake electors. So there's a lot to go on. I think the issue for us right now is anybody going to judge Trump with any criminal offense between now and, say, the election? And I think the answer is yes. I think people are making a huge point that the grand jury in Fulton County is not a standard grand jury. It's one that is set up if you are trying to spend a lot of time looking at what might well be a conspiracy of several people. And everybody from Lindsey Graham to Brian Kemp to all the fake electors have been called to testify. I think if you look at the language of the fraud statutes in election tampering kinds of statutes in Georgia, I don't see how he can escape being charged. We'll see. So that's our legal report for the day. I wanted to spend most of the time on why I think we have a good shot at keeping the House, but let me stop for a second and see whether people have thoughts, concerns, questions, insights, or insults on the legal issues.
Are you really saying, David, that he's not going to be charged with anything? He's not going to go to jail?
No, I didn't think I said that. So in order of certainty of criminal charges, first is Fani Willis in Fulton County. Second is Merrick Garland with regard to to fraudulent electors. Third is Merrick Garland with regard to the January 6th insurrection. Has a little bit more of a problem than fraudulent electors because you can beseech somebody to go to the Capitol and not necessarily be charged with criminal activity. And then the fourth would be the Mar-a-Lago. They're not doing that at Mar-a-Lago to try and put him in jail. They're just trying to get the records back. No, I think the chances that he will be charged and found guilty of a criminal offense is high. I don't necessarily think Merrick Garland will charge him before the first week of November. I think he might charge him later on, but I think Fani Willis could well. Either way, you know, I know it's been a headache for us since he came down the escalator in 2015. But right now, him in the news on a daily basis is a gift to your favorite candidates. Because for a long time, and we talked about this, for a long time, the strategy he has been taking to keep his deteriorating base is the same strategy that pisses off independent voters, especially suburban women. So it's just good for us. I know it's annoying. The chances he's going to be president again are zero. We might not want to think about who's going to be president in our behalf in 2+ years, because it's not going to be Joe Biden for sure. He's just not going to run, and he's some of us are creeping toward Joe's age, and we shouldn't be president either. It's pretty physically taxing. Other things on the legal front. I know you'd like to see him in an orange jumpsuit, but who knows?
Rita?
I was just going to say that I think being patience and time is on our side. And I think it's tough, but I think he will eventually pay for a lot of what he has done.
It seems like it.
Yeah.
He's what he's done, certainly with regard to calling Raffensperger and the associated efforts in putting together fraudulent electors across the country, is the January 6th committee has done a great job of exposing all that. And the people are divided on this. I don't see any evidence that Merrick Garland is turning the other way at all. I think we said on this call, people talk about, oh, what a horrible precedent it would be to convict the president of the United States. It would be a much worse precedent to not convict him.
Bingo.
What, you know, he's done
Bingo.
those things. You don't have an alternative. You can't say, well, he was the president. And the Republicans who are saying that with regard to him having top secret records they lost it a long time ago. They lost the last little bit of their integrity, if they had any left, when they said that.
Yeah, and I agree with you about Merrick Garland waiting until after the midterm elections, because, you know, it's already been accused of being political, the witch hunt.
Well,
so I think you're right. I think he will wait.
There will always be the accusation, but I also think he's mindful that the January 6th committee is building his case with the public. Just think of between now and last January, say there was no committee and he was now ready to charge. I mean, I think that those TV shows, they're not hearings, they're TV shows, have just been spectacular in terms of reaching the center. Something like 58% of Americans say that this matter should be aggressively pursued. That's a good number, and it's a higher number than what it's been. So let's go on to what's happening. 6 months ago, they said it's an off-year election. There's absolutely no chance that we're going to keep the House. You remember in the off-year election, Obama's first, we got massacred. We had passed the Affordable Care Act is what we should have. And then we decided that the best thing to do would be to not aggressively defend it. And we lost like 50, 60 seats. You also remember monumentally, we're all brokenhearted that this idiot won in 2016. And we took back 40, 36, 38 seats in 2018 and took back the House. So it's and then so the off-year elections, the years when presidents aren't running, as you know, are classically against the president's party. The exception was after Clinton was impeached over Monica Lewinsky. We did well in that off-year election because voters were mad at Republicans for making Clinton's reprehensible behavior an impeachable offense. So that's the exception. There are a lot of people who think this is going to be the exception too. But if you follow things like Nate Silver, he's still at about 25% that Pelosi will keep the House. But here's the rub. We made a list in the spring on this YouTube gathering of what had to happen for us to have a chance in November. And all of those plus one have happened. We said the Ukrainians had to be still fighting, which they are. Trump had to continue to be doing crazier than hell things, which he's, thank God, he is. Economy needed to still be employing people. Inflation needed to be reducing, which it is. Legislation needed to pass, so we got the gift of Manchin finally cutting a deal with Schumer. COVID needed to be less of an issue than it was, which it is, although we just had it, Cindy and I did, for a week, and boy, the fatigue was, I would consider the possibility of getting up out of my chair, and then I would reject the concept entirely. Anyway, all these things happened that we hoped would happen, and then an awful thing that works to our advantage that happened that we hoped wouldn't happen, and that was overturning Roe v. Wade. So it couldn't have gone better. So let's look at the evidence. So there was a special election in Hudson Valley, a lot of you know this, where Pat Ryan ran against a Republican county executive from the neighboring county. And this is all about how you do against anticipated results in whatever the district is. So if you have a special election and normally the base Republican vote is plus 30% over the Democrats, and all of a sudden you have a special election, Republican wins by plus 20%. That's interesting. What 538 and Nate Silver are looking at, and Politico is looking at too, is there something happening, not in primaries, but in special elections for open seats, that is giving us a signal that we're going to do better than people were kind of thinking we were? And so the analysis, the 538 analysis, is special. And it says that if you go over the last every special election since Roe and look at it from before, it's looking like we're plus sixing through all those things. That's what it looks like. And plus sixes in every race is enough to, or in most races, or in swing races, is enough for us to keep the House. What's the other evidence? So as we were talking when people got on, Mary Peltola, who's an Alaskan native, Yupik, just won the short-term election in Alaska. There's still a race in November with ranked voting and 4 candidates, including Sarah Palin, an institutional Republican, Nick Begich, an independent, and the Democrat, Mary Peltola. This is interesting because, as the Republicans were quick to point out, Republicans got 60% of the votes in the special election. However, that doesn't tell the whole world, the whole story, because in ranked choice voting, your second choice matters. And basically what's happening is Nick Begich, the other Republican, is to the center of Sarah Palin. And what can happen is people's second choice behind him can be Partula rather than Palin. And that those are weighted, and you can actually win in a ranked choice election, even though you didn't get the largest number of first choice votes. That would be delicious. One other thing is happening. I'm from Michigan, and in fact, I once ran ran the congressional campaign in what was then the third district in southwestern Michigan. That district has moved to the north, and in the primary, in Michigan, you can vote, you can cross over, take a Republican ballot, and in that primary, Hank Meyer, those of you who are from the Midwest know that he's from Meyer's Thrifty Acres grocery stores. Hank Meyer lost in his primary, and everybody said, oh, there's another Trump scalp, because Hank Meyer was one of the 10 Republicans who voted for impeachment. But that isn't what happened. Democrats crossed over, voted for the right winger so we can win in the general election. We're ahead in the general election. Postcard writers are writing into that district every day, and we're 6 points ahead. So you have to keep in mind that some of that happened too. And you could look at Jamie Herrera Butler losing in Southwest Michigan as a scalp, and it is more than Hank Meyer is. But even in that case, if Republicans had behaved themselves and not given 35% of the vote to Maria Gluesenkamp Perez, then Jamie Herrera Butler would have survived. Adam Kinzinger was complaining about all this and saying, those damn Democrats, somebody dares to vote to impeach Trump, and then they conspire to not have that person be reelected. I don't feel that way. You can take Jamie Herrera Butler and Hank Meyer and every Republican Dan Newhouse, and their normal vote is with Kevin McCarthy. Do we have to give them a lifelong pass because they did what they were supposed to do? I don't think so. I think you vote for somebody based upon their entire record, and that entire record means tax breaks for the rich, comforting the comfortable, till the cows come home, and doing other asinine things. So I feel fine about it. Anyway, to make a long story short, the news is all good. The generic vote is a pollster question that says, would you vote for the Democrat or the Republican for Congress? Doesn't include any names. And starting this election cycle, we were running -4 or so. Now the Real Clear Politics average is even or +1. We get up to +2 or +3, even with the redistricting shenanigans of the Republicans, we'll win the House by a narrow margin. It will be historic or rare, and that will we'll keep the Senate. That will give, this is not a prediction, this is a pregnant possibility. We'll have the possibility that Joe Biden will get three more reconciliation bills, that will have at least a couple more senators, and that will make Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema less powerful, and that we'll have a good 2 years while we figure out who's running for president on our behalf. So I think that's the issue. What has to happen so the narrative to continue to be positive? Well, Biden's got to not do anything crazy. We've got to not lose in Ukraine. We don't need pictures of Zelensky being shot or arrested between now and November. We're not going to lose in Ukraine, but it can't happen. We can't have overreach with regard to Trump. We've already talked about that. We the inflation needs to continue to be under control, and we need Fed not to drive us into an awful recession on October 15th. What could happen to help us a little bit more? Well, the reverse of all those things, Ukraine doing well, inflation dropping even more, and of course, Trump being Trump could continue to help us. I want to say one thing about Washington state races, but that I just threw out a lot of stuff, including 4 pieces of evidence that we should do. We may well do better than we think in November. So let me stop there and let's talk it over.
You know, David, one thing that I saw last night on TV, probably MSNBC, even though that the Democrats and Republicans, each have 50 senators, the Democrats 50 represent 40 million more people than the Republican senators. That's unbelievable. Well, it's fact. So, I mean, that tells us a lot about, the way votes are tallied.
Well, I was telling folks just as before you got on that inexplicably, 2 weeks from Sunday at the Bainbridge Library, some fool is going to talk about what Madison thinks about all this. And that fool is me. I'm going to do a program on the 18th on what Madison would say about the Constitution facing all these things. And what he would say on this is, well, Tom, in 1787, what we had were states, and Madison himself, being from Virginia, was in favor of proportional representation in both the House and Senate. The delegates were pretty much agreed to have both the House and the Senate. They liked that. The senators having longer terms, and they ran into a big problem with regard to how they would pick each body. This is back when the only relevant people were white property owning males anyway, but they had this argument, and the population was all in Pennsylvania, New York, and Virginia. And in fact, as it turned out, the first 5 presidents in Massachusetts, and the first 5 presidents were from Massachusetts and Virginia. But it goes down to this: there would never have been a United States if we had had proportional representation. States were entities that were bigger in the lives of the people than the people themselves. If you asked somebody what they were, they wouldn't say, I'm an American. They'd say, I'm a Virginian. I'm from New Jersey. I'm a Georgian. So it's the fact of our birth. And then you would say, yes, David, I understand that. It's intolerable. It must change. And I'm here to say it's not going to. You'd have to have 38 states ratify a constitutional amendment. So it's not unconstitutional because it's constitutional. That's how the Constitution was organized. And there were times, unbelievably, when you and I were growing up, that the Senate was considerably more liberal than the House. So you could argue that's more that they have 6-year terms. But at any rate, I'm here to tell you that as much as people would like the presidential election by popular vote or the Senate to be apportioned like the House is, it's not going to happen. There's not a chance in the world. So the only solution then is elect better senators in swing states. And so it seems clear that Fetterman's going to beat Oz. Mandela Barnes is ahead of Ron Johnson. That gives us 2. That'd be nice. You have to defend Warnock. Herschel Walker's still hanging around. But you could see Val Demings beat Rubio. You could see your man Ryan in Ohio beat J.D. Vance. You could see Sherry Beasley win in in South Carolina, and then if we held on with our own seats at risk, we could get to 54 or 55. So that would be nice. Now, what some people are saying is, well, it still should get rid of the filibuster. As you already know, I don't feel that way. I'd be happy with 54 senators and passing major stuff through reconciliation with 50 votes, only not having Manchin and Sinema be able to veto us. I'm happy that Manchin came over and got us a climate bill, but we should not feel all rosy toward him because he's not at the center of our party. He did that for a reason. He did it because he got some concessions on energy. He did it because he wants Democrats to win in November. And he did it because he can't be chair of Energy and Commerce if Democrats don't have 50 votes. So that's why he did that. It was clever of him and Schumer to do it with the timing they did. And that's what got Mitch all upset. Questions about my thesis that we have a decent shot in November in the House and very much in the Senate.
I have something, I think I'm talking governors here of Oz and Fetterman.
No, they're senators. They're gonna be, John Fetterman.
Oh, yeah,
is
yeah,
lieutenant
because
governor. That would be Pat Toomey's seat. So that's a take back, Sheila, which we need. Some of these things like Warnock, we just have, and Mark Kelly, we have to win just to hold even. So you're thinking about where could we take back a seat? That would be Mandela Barnes over Ron Johnson, Sherry Beasley in an open seat. That's what's his name's seat in North Carolina. We could have Val Demings win in Florida. So we have about 4 takebacks, and the number one is Fetterman. You shouldn't give him money because he's going to win by 6-8 points.
Okay, so who do we send the money to?
Well, if you're sending to candidates, well, Cindy and I send money to organizers. So as some of you know, I just use my blog to support Mi Familia Vota, which does Latino registration and getting out the vote in 6 states, including 4 that are critical to us. And what we did was the Republican running for Secretary of State and to control elections in Arizona is a guy named Fincham. And Fincham doesn't believe in the last election results. And so we had a campaign that was just followers of my blog that just raised almost $13,000 for them to increase their digital advertising among Latino Facebook and social media users. I don't, other than Kim Schreier, we haven't been giving money to candidates. You can, and there's nothing wrong with doing it. If I were to give money to a candidate, I'd give it to Sherry Beasley in North Carolina, who was elected statewide as Supreme Court Justice. And the trouble is the guy she's running against is not quite as crazy. Val Demings has a chance against Rubio. So I'd pick one of those. Or as you mentioned before, Sheila, Mandela Barnes against Ron Johnson would be a good place to give money.
I have to send my money to Wisconsin.
You know, sure. And when that's a good place, it's about time Wisconsin got back to being the state it was before these folks took over.
My whistleblower in there, my input person in there is saying that Barnes is in good shape.
Yeah. And remember, as I said in our last call, almost all these swing states have huge battles over state legislative control or over choice right now. So that helps us in those states. It helps get out the votes that the Venn diagram or the interlocking circles that talk about where there are big choice battles and where there are big Senate and House battles are very similar, and that's nothing but a cool thing. Other questions?
What about Stacey Abrams?
You know, I'm worried about that. I think for some reason, Brian Kemp saying no to Trump has hurt us rather than being the usual hack. I think the fact right now, Raphael Warnock is polling 3 points or so ahead of Stacey Abrams. That's got to be a worrisome thing. And then you superimpose the little things that can turn out to be big things they did to suppress the votes. She could roll a 48 again, just like that. It could happen. That'd be too bad.
Yeah.
So if you were to give, in addition to candidates, one great way to find out, this is in my blog and it will be again, is I look for, as you know, David Domke of the UW has started Common Power, used to be Common Purpose, and he chooses partners in these states that are organizers or organizing organizations. So I often recommend those. You'll see them on his website, but my blog comes out in a week and I'll be mentioning those local activist organizations again. A reason I move in that direction is there's so much money in the big ticket races that I like to find somebody who needs it a little bit more. I did want to mention the 3 Washington races. Keep in mind as we rail about redistricting that Washington has been a horse trading state forever. And rather than looking for swing districts, the Democrats and Republicans have done trades. That's why Susan Del Bene has a safe seat. And what they traded when they did that was that they tried to give Dave Reichert enough Republican counties in East Side so that would be a pretty safe Republican seat. And then 4 years ago, of course, Kim Schreier won it. More than 4 years, 4.5, 4. Anyway, in 2018, she won it. So she had a good turnout. We did an event for her on Bainbridge, raised her $25,000. And that's a race to keep in mind. She's raised, they're still calling a toss-up. I think it should be a lean. Basically, she got about as same amount of money as the 3 Republican candidates added up. And you can't just transfer those votes over. There'll be some Republican who voted for Reagan Dunn who wouldn't vote for Matt Larkin, who won. So I think she's looking good, especially with all these other trends we described. So I feel good about her, but we may actually have her come to Bainbridge again in October. Then there's Dan Newhouse. There's a great guy named Doug White who was hoping that Lauren Culp would beat Dan Newhouse so he could take the center and be the first Democratic congressman from Yakima since Jay Inslee. However, Dan Newhouse beat Lauren Culp in the primary because Lauren Culp is a maniacal. Lauren Culp is, back in the days when we were incarcerating people who were delusional in large facilities, he would have been a candidate. I'm telling you, he's and I'm glad we're not doing that anymore. So, at any rate, I wouldn't put my money on Doug White. It breaks my heart. But a lot of us are watching the Southwest district, which is Vancouver all the way up toward Olympia, in which Marie Gusenklamp Perez is running against, his name is Joe Kent. Joe Kent has called for defunding the FBI. He's a perfect candidate for us to run against. But the Democrats did not anticipate this. If they had run Carolyn Long, who we saw last time, it would have been better. But all those the Seattle types are raising money like mad for Perez. She's very interesting. She's blue collar person in a blue collar district. She and her husband own an auto repair shop. She's a classic liberal. I'm just unhappy with her because she's against a ban on assault weapons, which isn't a bad thing in her district because if they voted, they'd be against it too. But you might take a look at that race. So that's I had one other thing to say before we close, but that's my meditation on how things are going. We're looking to take back 4 Senate seats. We're looking to barely save ourselves in the House. We're looking to give Joe Biden a chance to be president for another 2 years. And then we better start looking for the reason why Joe Biden hasn't said he's not running again is that's an awful thing to do before 2 years are up. Eventually that will start to be presumed next year. But we don't need all our candidates from the past to be out there right now. You can bet they're thinking about it. It's pretty much the same cast as last time. You can bet that Buttigieg is reveling at chewing out the airlines. The Klobuchar's out there. Kamala Harris is not going to give ground easily. Cory Booker would be interested. So I think we're in danger of having, not in danger.
What about Gavin Newsom?
I'm not I wouldn't do it, but I mean, I know he's an articulate man, but he's got to suffer some judgment problems by having a big party outdoors in the middle of the city.
Oh, yeah.
COVID.
Right.
No, I think I don't think independents are dying for a California liberal. Myself, why not run a woman?
I agree.
Klobuchar?
No, I went with, but I want Pete and Amy.
Who and Amy? Pete and Amy?
Pete and Amy.
Amy
Yeah.
and Pete.
Yeah.
In the olden days, you'd always be talking about a governor too. And, Jimmy Carter was a governor. Clinton was a governor. I'm forgetting
Whitmer.
Reagan was a
What about
governor,
Whitmer?
George Bush. But those governors don't seem to be getting out there. My favorite governor right now is the Republican governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, who's called the election over, which is good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go to the beach, but I wanted to say one more thing. Whenever we do something good, we need to defend that it was the right thing to do. And it's good for us to defend it in a responsible and fully informed fashion. So right now, we should be reveling that Joe Biden did something on student loans, which are an albatross hanging around the neck of people from age 20 to 50. And the reason he didn't do it quickly, we should recognize, and that is, if you just gave money to everybody who owed loans, it would be regressive. That is, you would give more money to people who have money and less money. It would be disproportionately advantageous to people who have assets. So they means tested it, and they had to decide. So if you make more than $125,000 a year or $250 as a couple, you don't get any loan forgiveness. So that's pretty good. I would have gone lower and captured desperation a little bit more assiduously. So what's happening on Facebook now is people are saying, what? You Republicans are complaining about loan forgiveness, and all these rich people got forgiveness under the payroll protection program. I'm just saying that when we passed with Democratic votes the payroll protection program, we made loan forgiveness the objective of the program. We wanted everybody who got those loans to commit to continuing to have those folks on payroll and therefore to not have to pay the loan back. It is disingenuous of us to make it sound like student loans. When we did the student loan program, we were hoping that everybody would get a good enough job to pay us back. Now, it turned out that there were all sorts of problems with that, and we're right to forgive it, but we need to argue our position so that independents don't think it's just some classic giveaway, which it is not. It's a restoration of opportunity. In America, it's done carefully, and that's what our position should be. So I'm just noting that occasionally that we need to show some care. Similarly, on inflation, it is absolutely the case that Joe Biden is not the king of inflation. It's the war in Ukraine intervened, drove up gas prices. Supply chain problems happened because we had cut down on our supply chain and during the COVID, and then all of a sudden it wasn't up to the challenge of rapidly expanding. But it is the case that we put money out there intentionally 2 years ago because we had to, because people would have starved and gotten thrown out of their houses, and the availability of that money was absolutely a contributor to inflation. So I just think it's good for us to know those things, that occasionally the other side has a concern that is almost always wrong-headed, but it's good for us to understand the basis of those concerns. It makes us better able to get independent voters on our side. Say, doesn't happen quite as much on Bainbridge, but say you knew somebody over there in Bellevue who was thinking that it's not good to have Nancy Pelosi be speaker, and was complaining that they paid off their student loans. You would want to have a good argument, and you'd want to say, look, this debt is escalating and it's preventing the American economy from growing in a sustainable fashion like it should. And we didn't give money to everyone. We gave money to people for whom the debt was not diminishing. And it was a wonderful thing that we're a nation that was able to do that. So we have to be able to make those arguments.
And we hope to see you October 7th on Friday. So
We look forward to it.
we love it, David. Thank you so
Hopefully,
much.
hopefully we'll have some good news.
Oh, yes. Take
Thank
care. Bye-bye.